everyone. Welcome to the second episode of The Great Devourer. Once again, this is a series for Tyranid players looking to try and keep up competitively with the top armies of the day. Today's main focus is on competing against the dreaded nemesis of the meta right now, Space Marines. Space Marines are obviously top dog and have been for just about a year now. They have evolved over time and got another huge boost with the release of the Indomitus starter box. I think just about everyone is hoping the new codex in October will even the army out a little bit. Otherwise, it's going to be just another 6 months of power armored dominance. Having said that, this episode looks at the matchup of Tyranids versus Space Marines and what tips and tricks can help you overcome a much stronger army. To start, we need to analyze what the Space Marine army is going to look like. As far as I've seen, it's going to be at least 2 units of Blade Guard in every list. These are just strong, durable objective holders that can punch anything that gets too close. And honestly, they're devastating in Assault Doctrine if they're playing Blood Angels, or even worse if they're White Scars. Next, every list is going to have probably a single unit of Grav Devastators. Often these are in a drop pod, or they'll be in a Rhino if they're White Scars and are listening to how John Lennon likes to play. After that, a good portion of lists are running aggressors. Those are really popular right now, especially in Salamander and Ultramarine lists. Whereas White Scars can upgrade those aggressors and still run Assault Centurions effectively, and still do pretty well with those. Scorpius tanks are in just under half the lists that I've seen. Same with Contemptor Mortis Dreads with las cannons, so we need to be able to survive and still deal damage to Toughness 7 vehicles. Blood Angels are deep striking in Sanguinary Guard, and what few Space Wolf players there are currently spamming Wolfen, as far as I've seen. On top of that, people are also starting to gravitate towards Landspeeder Storms with scouts in them, and they treat them just like the Venoms in the Dark Eldar, it's just a quick vehicle that can drop an OBSEC unit on any objective at a moment's notice and steal points out from under you, especially for White Scars who can still act after disembarking. Taking all of this into account, we need to be able to take out all of these units efficiently while not immediately dying if your opponent goes first. Hive Guard are very strong against Marines, but can lose a lot of efficiency if they have to fire through dense terrain, or they can be really neutered if your opponent has a Scorpius and they go first. Giving your Hive Guard enhanced resistance helps from turn 2 on, but for that first turn while the Scorpius is in Devastator Doctrine, means that it takes out an average of 3 Hive Guard. This obviously drastically reduces the effectiveness of your unit, and you might want to consider even reserving them. No, even though I know that cuts down on their effectiveness a lot, at least they're not dead. The rest of the game, if you do have enhanced resistance and are in cover, the Scorpius hardly hurts them, only killing a single Hive Guard with both volleys. However, if your Hive Guard can successfully hide and your opponent doesn't have a Scorpius, they can be one of your strongest assets in this matchup. They can kill T7 vehicles like Dreadnoughts, and are also really good at just clearing out stuff you otherwise would be unable to touch. Fire them twice every turn you can afford, and clear your opponent off of backfield objectives, and deny them their primary points. That is the most effective use for Hive Guard that I've found. Turn 1, I would definitely consider having them kill those Landspeeder Storms to get rid of your opponent's mobility if they have those. The next problem unit we have to deal with are those Blade Guard veterans, and that's where we need to upgrade from the Hive Guard to the Exocrine. Give it some Biostorm and use that stratagem for Pathogenic Slime, because you really need that 3 damage to take out that unit, and as long as you have a firing lane on 2 units, it's worth spending the CP to make sure that they both die. Otherwise, it's just a very annoyingly durable unit. If your opponent has their aggressors visible to your Exocrine, obviously go for those instead, because they're much more of a threat, but most of the time your opponent's going to be smart enough to hide those, and instead they just have the Blade Guard sitting on the objectives where you can shoot them. And with Symbiostorm and Pathogenic Slime, a single volley of 6 shots per unit on average picks up the whole unit with an average of 3.1 failed saves per 6 shots. It might seem like a waste of one of our strongest firepower units, but keeping those objectives clear is how you win the game. The next unit that we need to take out is aggressors, and like I said, if you have that firing lane with your Exocrine, that is the best way to take them out. You can pick up an entire unit of 6 in one turn, but most of the time they're going to be a little more hidden than that. And so I found the best way to take care of aggressors is to use their short range against them. They either outflank with salamanders and have 11-inch flamers, or they can be ultramarines using their super doctrine to move and still shoot twice with mass boltstorm gauntlets. For both of these, you need to screen them out as much as possible. And against salamanders, that means you need to hold the table edges with sacrificial gaunts, preventing them from coming within 9 inches of the table, of like any of those side table edges. And for ultramarines, you need to stay outside of their 19-inch threat range. They could still advance and shoot you with their boltstorm gauntlets, but at least if they're doing that, they're only shooting once. And if you're outside of 25 inches, then you're safe from their threat range entirely. Once they have been screened out, you can then pick them up with either Hive Guard, who average killing 2 aggressors per volley, so spend 2 CP to kill 4 of them. But what's even better than that is hit them with a fast-moving melee monster. Flyrants are the best choice here, as they're durable enough that they should survive the Overwatch, even if they're Ultramarines with Gilliman, giving them the reroll everything. Just watch out for that Ultramarine stratagem that turns them into essentially Tau Overwatch if they're next to some heavier weapons. But you really need that flat 3 damage, and I would spend the 1 CP to reroll wounds, because your opponent's probably going to use the transhuman on that aggressor unit. Either a Flyrant or a Deep Striking Trigon with Murderous Size are great for this role, as long as they can get to their target. Otherwise, once again, if your opponent does give you that clean line of shooting, then Exocrine with Pathogenic Slime can pick up an entire unit in a single turn. The next scary unit we have to worry about are Grav Devastators. Unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do against them, as we can't kill them before they shoot since they're in reserve in the drop pod, and they can hit turn 1 from pretty much anywhere, again, because they're deep striking in. The best thing we can do is either play a list with no saves that are a 3+ or better. We're likely not doing that unless we're playing a pure Gaunt Carpet list. Or we can have Toughness 8 just about everywhere and then use the Maleceptor strat to reduce the strength to 4. Both of these are pretty drastic measures, but those Grav Devastators, especially the Salamanders one, taking +1 to wound, can really be devastating. That unit still has a pretty decent chance of killing a monster with an average of 11.8 wounds, but that's literally half the wounds they would do without the Maleceptor strat. Once they're in, be sure to take them out as quickly as possible. They should be really close to you and fairly easy to remove, and they definitely are one of your highest priorities before they get to devastate another unit. I find that the Swarmlord catapulting a Flyrant with Murderous Size and the Sides of Tyran are perfect for taking out a big threat turn 1 before it can really mess with your army. I talked about this in the last video, but it is the Tyranid answer for Assault Centurions or Aggressors, or any big scary tank that your opponent has. This model can even take out an entire Imperial Knight in a turn if it fights twice with rerolling wounds. So I do highly recommend taking that. Even if your opponent doesn't have any of those key units, they probably are going to have Outriders who have 4 wounds and that flat 4 damage. Fighting twice, most of the time my opponent has those in the front, and I can fight twice and take out 2 units of Outriders, which is pretty nice. Now, also against Marines, you need to score secondaries and primary objectives. This is often very difficult to do because, again, they're running mostly elite infantry and you don't really get any points for killing any of them. So you need to build a list that can get at least 30 points in secondaries without having to worry about what you kill. For this reason, you need to build an army that can deploy Scramblers for 10 points and then either Linebreaker or Engage on all fronts for at least another 12 points. And after that, I actually like to include a Psyker specifically for the mission, because often you're left between choosing a really low-scoring kill objective or the Psychic choices, which can be pretty rough if you only have a couple Psykers and you don't want to waste them on just doing actions for points. So usually I go for a Broodlord who specifically goes out looking just for characters for mental interrogation. If I think it's possible, I might go for the Psychic Ritual. I also need to take 1 Lictor in my list for deploy scramblers, possibly 2 Lictors, but normally I can get away with just 1. And then you need to involve quite a few other deep striking units that can fill in any gaps in order to get line breaker or engage on all fronts. And Rippers are good for this, but actually I've taken to using Molochs lately. That way your opponent can't really screen them out because they can just show up 1 inch away. So you can also pop up on an objective, and then if your Exocrine shoots your opponent off of that objective, it's suddenly yours rather than just leaving the objective empty after shooting them off. I also tend to leave so many things on just 1 or 2 wounds that the Moloch has been pretty great at just playing cleanup. And if you have 2 and your opponent's playing a castle, then that Terror from the Deep stratagem on each of them, 1 turn 2 and 1 turn 3, can actually take out a lot of key characters. Recently, I've heard a lot of people talking about how good Zoanthropes are right now, and I'm happy everyone's been having success with them. I honestly have not really experienced the same thing. They are very durable, but their damage output has been really low, and that wouldn't be a problem if they were OBSEC. Just having a really nice, durable OBSEC unit would be great, but all your opponent really has to do to counter Zoanthropes is screen effectively, so your smites are getting mostly wasted, or they can just charge the Zoanthropes because they're not a threat in combat at all. And suddenly on your turn, you either smite the unit you're in combat with or fall back and do nothing. And neither one of those seem like an ideal option, especially if that unit is OBSEC, they're stealing the objective away from you, or if, they have just simply more models. The best experience I had with Zoanthropes was actually yesterday. I tried them out against both Blood Angels and Orcs yesterday, and they did really good where a squad of 5 Leviathan Zoanthropes went toe-to-toe with a Gorkanaut. The Gorkanaut deep struck in and charged the unit, and I just didn't fail an invuln save, so they kept it stuck there for the entire game, and they actually even killed it by the bottom of turn 5. I did have 2 of their smites roll an 11 plus to do tons of damage, but that's just it. Most of the time, the units didn't do anything, and the best that one unit did was take an entire game to kill a Gorkanaut, which, to be fair, is 320 points compared to their 225. But again, that's the best that I've had them do over the course of probably 6 games with them. It just overall has not really been a stellar experience for me, but I'm happy other people are getting it to work, and they do get better the more elite the meta is, and the meta's never been more elite than what it is right now. Having said that, for the perfect list against Marines, I would take a large monster army with a Maleceptor. You want plenty of Exocrine, you probably want the Swarmlord and Flyrant combo to take out key units before they can do too much damage to your list. Or, again, if there's really nothing crazy about their list, it's at least a perfect answer to Outriders, if nothing else. You also want to have plenty of small, deep-striking units to keep up your engage on all fronts secondary and force your opponent to stay mobile. You want to add in an extra psychic character just to do the secondary missions, because you need to get those points. And Hive Guard are great as long as your opponent can't threaten them, but you suffer a huge blow if you lose them early with how pricey they are. So I'm actually considering dropping them from my lists, and following all of that advice, I ended up with the following list, which includes a Behemoth Battalion, again starting with Swarmlord and a Flyrant with the Murderous Scythes and Scythes of Tyran. I also gave it Adrenal Glands just to ensure it gets that charge, but you can throw those points elsewhere if needed. For the third HQ, I include a Broodlord with the Resonance Barb. I actually really like this guy. I give him Unending Hunger as his power, and the Resonance Barb really helps to get that off. And then he can also just smite to hurt some things as an added bonus. And that Unending Hunger, he can put on the Flyrant with Murderous Scythes turn 1, and then honestly either put it on Swarmlord or himself, making both of their abilities trigger on 5 pluses to wounds, Swarmlord doing extra mortal wounds, and the Broodlord doing AP 6 for flat 3 damage. Being strength 5 with +1 to wound and re-rolling wounds, and then super rending on 6 pluses, makes the Broodlord actually really, beastly in combat. Even toughness 8 stuff, he's wounding on 4s, re-rolling, and any 5 and 6 is going to be AP 6 for flat 3 damage. It allows him to really take out things much larger than he is. Again, this is a battalion, so you fill it out with troops. I take 2 units of 3 Rippers, again, just for that engage on all fronts, and if there is an open objective to grab, even better. I finish out the rest of the troops with just 2 units of 3 Bare Bones Warriors. These guys are to deploy scramblers and just sit on objectives. Then a Lictor. This is going to be your final guy. Deep strike into your opponent's deployment zone and deploy that last scrambler to get you a guaranteed 10 points. I also take a Maleceptor. Again, you really need that just for that turn 1 durability. As long as you have a single effective turn of shooting at your opponent, you can keep up with the Marines, and the Maleceptor ensures that you're going to be alive to do that. If you lose 2 Exocrines or you lose just too much of your army in that first turn, it can be really hard to come back from that. And even if you're only using the Encephalic Diffusion strat one time, I still actually think he's worth taking in the list. Alongside this Behemoth Battalion, I take a Chronos Spearhead. I take a Broodlord. Again, this guy is purely just to get psychic points. He runs around doing mental interrogation, or if I think I can get away with it, he does the ritual. He also is great because that only takes his psychic actions, so any opponents that get too close to your gun line, he can just punch them away. I also have a Neurothrope with Symbiostorm. You want this to be a Neurothrope because you really need Symbiostorm to go off every single turn. I would even use the command point reroll if you have to. With that, you take your 3 Exocrine. This is going to be the big damage dealers of your list. I would outflank one of them and give one of them Dermic Symbiosis. That way, the one who has the Symbiosis can sit up front and hopefully survive turn 1 between the Invuln and the -1 Strength. The second one hides out of line of sight, and then you spend the 1 CP to move him and have him count as having not moved if you get first turn. And the third one, outflanking, is obviously protected, and then same thing, spend 1 CP to outflank and shoot as having counted as not moving. And then to finish the list, I have 2 Molochs. Again, these are just to harass objectives and ensure you're getting all of your engage on all front points that you need. This list is unfortunately really light on CP. You only start with 7, and after spending 1 to outflank the Exocrine, you're only left with 2 CP to use the Maleceptor strat, and then another 3 CP to fight twice with the Flyrant to get his points worth. And that only leaves you with enough CP to count the Exocrine as having not moved it when it outflanks, and maybe use the Terror from the Deep strat on the Molochs twice. Or if you need to, you can save up that CP for a second use of the Encephalic Diffusion. That's your choice depending on the matchup. So obviously this list could use some tweaks to it, especially to fix the CP problem, but it does have the durability to survive a turn 1 Alpha Strike, and then the strength to hit back really hard, which in the current meta is really something that you need. If your opponent is playing defensible Marines that you don't think you can really kill, just focus on the guys on objectives, and you have enough options with all your deep striking to still score points even if you're not killing a whole lot. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and comments on how you've been taking on the Marine meta, and so feel free to leave a comment down below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Hit the subscribe button, as it really is a great motivator for me to keep on making these videos and shows me that you want more videos in the future. I will catch all of you in the next video. Thanks again for watching.